Hey everybody, welcome to another Rackspace Cloud Office Hours Hangout. It's Rackspace's live show where we talk about the cloud and all of the great things that we can do here in the cloud. Got a really fun show for you today as we broadcast live from the Castle, Rackspace's headquarters here in San Antonio, Texas. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Alan Bush, and along with us is our co-host Drew Cox. How you doing, Drew?
Doing great. How are you?
Oh, not
You
too
just said you're
shabby.
doing well, so I guess that's the answer.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then joining us today, our third time co-hosting with us is the Rackspace CTO John Engates. John, how you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm doing good. Thanks.
Great, great. Glad to hear it. Glad to have you aboard. And I think we can just might want to mention really quickly that later this evening you're about to get a really cool award, the San Antonio Tech Titan Award, and you'll be keynoting
Yeah,
that event as well. So just congratulations to you on that.
thank you.
That's
Thank you very
a
much.
well earned honor for you there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's not the reason that we brought you here today. The reason that we wanted to have you here today was to talk to you about this really cool blog post that you made for Rackspace. I guess this is at least the second year in a row that you've been making these, um,
Yep.
and it's your predictions for the cloud for the next year. So
Yeah.
that's what we'll be talking about today. So you have about 9 different predictions. I don't know if we'll be able to hit all of them today, but we'll be talking about as many as we can. And I'd like to invite anybody that's watching along with us today to also engage in the conversation. So if you're watching live on Google+, you'll see along the right-hand column there's a little question and answer box where you can drop in a question, and we'd be happy to answer it for you. If you're watching on Twitter, you can tweet at us at CloudQA, and we'll be able to follow along with those and mention it there. So all right, well, let's go ahead and get started then. We've got quite a few topics to cover, like I mentioned, and I just want to make sure that we can spend as much time as we can chatting uh, about these topics. So let's jump in. The very first thing that you mentioned in this blog post is that we're going to have a lot more choices in the cloud. So the cloud consumers are going to have many, many more choices. So can you tell us a little bit about what some of those choices are and how you see that benefiting consumers down the road?
Sure. Well, I think even though we're probably 6, 7, 8 years into the cloud computing industry or market, I think that there's still a lot of evolution going on, a lot of change going on, a lot of companies figuring out what their specific unique angle is on the cloud and trying to kind of go in a different direction with it to make sure that they're catering to their specific customers. I think in the early days, Amazon was sort of the first and sort of the biggest company, and a lot of people just sort of jumped into the cloud and thought, well, let's be like Amazon. Let's make sure we have these services that are API driven and automated, and that's what they thought cloud was. But the truth is, customers are going to need more and more and more from the cloud as they move out of their data centers or out of private colo facilities or wherever their applications sit, and as they expect to bring a more broad variety of applications to the cloud has to respond, and I think we're seeing that in a number of ways. So first of all, Rackspace this year, we kind of took a turn in terms of how we were going to market and how we were competing, and instead of going pure commodity, race to the bottom, cheapest possible price, we sort of took the approach that we're going to compete on service and support and expertise and what we call managed cloud. And so that's a choice. That's a different kind of a choice that customers now have that they didn't have previously. I think you're going to see other competitors go at it in similar ways, in the sense of, let's not just try to race to the bottom, price is the only thing. And we have another prediction about that, but I think that people are going to have to differentiate themselves in a number of ways. One of the things that we also did this year is we added more choices around private clouds. We heard from our customers loud and clear that one size didn't fit all in private cloud, so we introduced some new offerings and capabilities around VMware-based clouds, and Microsoft is the most recent entrant into that market with a private cloud offering here at Rackspace. So that's kind of what I mean by choice. I mean, there's probably a lot more that we could dig into, but essentially I just really meant that customers were going to have more than a one-size-fits-all option. They were going to have a lot of options out there from a lot of different companies to meet a lot of different new and emerging needs when it comes to cloud computing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of focusing of specific organizations' expertise, as well as delivering specific components. I know that a lot of the product side offerings that Rackspace has put out have been workload optimized. So components that do a really good job of front-loading that device with RAM. So if you've got RAM-heavy roles you're trying to get taken care of, you can deploy just that specific thing, and you're going to see that grow over the entire ecosystem. I think you're going to see more of these third-party offerings where, New Relic focuses really, really heavily on the monitoring side, and they're seeing, we're doing so much big data that we're going to offer some of our big data stuff with their intelligence component. And so you're going to see more and more companies see where their expertises are, those side things that they're working on that they're good at, finding a way to offer those to their users and to their customer base. I think is going to be another facet of that very thing that you're going to see those options continue to grow as.
You actually reminded me in that statement there about the choices that customers have. I mean, we introduced something called On Metal this year. On Metal is a bare metal cloud option that customers have that they can really shape into whatever kind of architecture that they want, instead of having to choose from a preset VM size or a preset kind of mixture of resources. Now you have the opportunity to take the entire machine and use it however you want. You can really take that massive CPU heavy machine or RAM heavy machine or IO performant machine, and you can craft it into whatever kind of application component that you might need, which is really again a choice that customers didn't have a year ago. And I think that's just an example. There are going to be many, many more of these kinds of capabilities as we continue to evolve cloud computing.
I thought I'd already hit the unmute button. And I think that's going to be a really compelling space to be watching as you see different jobs make it to the cloud. There's all kinds of legacy tools that don't work as well today in the cloud as they do on hardware, but I think that as more and more of those needs become apparent, you're going to see more and more change. I think one of the things we saw over 2014 was that bottleneck of databases in the cloud just not working and not being as performant and not having that auto failover thing. SQL doesn't traditionally look that compelling in the cloud, or didn't. But over the last year, I think I've seen 3 or 4 different companies come to market with something that helps you take a database that's really monolithic and break that up into multiple nodes so that you can run a multi-node back-end on something that's more legacy in the cloud. And that's just an example of that starting to play out, and something that I really saw that was non-existent in 2013. 2014 really showed that specific space show up, and then that's just momentum towards the next phase of it that you predict for 2015. And
I think in databases, an example of that would be something that we did that was, we launched a Redis service this year for in-memory key value store. We built a purpose-built platform for that, so you kind of think of that as yet another choice of a different flavor of cloud computing. We introduced a few new options around the MySQL database, the Percona, MariaDB, those kinds of things that were, again, new options. And I think that this isn't just about new versions of existing products. This is also about innovating around kind of the mixture of performance-based hardware and networking capabilities and technologies that underpin OpenStack, and putting those together in new and interesting ways for companies so that they can take advantage of the cloud without a lot of pain. I think that's that managed cloud bit. We shouldn't minimize that, because having the help and the expertise to go along with all these components is also a big part of a different kind of a choice in cloud computing.
Yeah, one of the things that you just mentioned there with these new emerging technologies being in that choice set leads me to one of your other predictions, is that containerization, or the container, as you put it. That's really one of those things that is picking up steam and should really hit its stride next year,
Right.
as Docker and those types of tools, the tools around containerization, really become standard. I think that it's something that's been interesting to see grow, but I'd really like to hear more of your take on why 2015 is going to be such a banner year for containers.
Right. Well, look, I think this year, 2014, was really the beginnings of this sort of wave of innovation and invention around containers. I spoke, keynoted actually the first DockerCon this year, and if you don't know Docker, Docker is really the probably the hottest name right now in terms of containers and the technology around them. And containers aren't necessarily a new thing. They've been around for many years. I think what's happened lately is that companies have gravitated to them for a number of reasons, and they've made them easy to use for developers. Containers originally, were really created to allow people to take advantage of every bit of the CPU or the performance of a machine. Instead of having capacity that's sitting around idle and waiting for work, it's a way to sort of, kind of compartmentalize applications and put more of those on top of an existing hardware platform. Similar to the way virtualization worked. Virtualization was sort of intended to do the same thing, but containers takes that to a more fine-grained level where you can actually put more of those workloads on a given machine, spin them up very quickly, dispose of them just as quickly, and move them around quite readily. And I think developers have gravitated to it, not so much for that efficiency angle, but for the ease of use, the ease of deployment, the ease of managing and deploying their code, moving workloads from cloud to cloud or from machine to machine. Those are all benefits that containers have brought. And I think Docker as a company has brought sort of the ease of use to containers. They've made it easy for developers to build and compose complex applications using containers as the foundation. You can, in the picture that we went and put in the blog post, you actually see this idea of a container ship, something going across the ocean with these boxes on top. And those boxes, for all practical purposes, no one on the ship cares what's in the box. It's really just a unit that can be moved and moved around very quickly, pulled on and off the ship very quickly. Prior to that, moving cargo was a very different thing, and I think that's the same kind of analogy that's going on in computing today. It's hard today to move applications. They're brittle. You have to know a lot about them, but if you put them in a container and you move that as a unit of work, it becomes a lot easier, and developers are really gravitating. So with that idea of container ships, the other thing that had to happen was the container ship industry grew up around it. You have trucking, you have cranes, you have machines, you have docks, you have ports and ships that are all designed for this. Well, that same thing's going on in computing as well. Companies are building all of the infrastructure around this idea of a container to make it work. Every cloud company is working hard on making it easy for people to onboard their containers onto their cloud or onto their cloud infrastructure. There are companies like, certainly Docker is the one that gets the most attention, but CoreOS is another company that we know very well that has created a technology that they just launched it a few days ago called Rocket, which is kind of an alternative form of maybe you could think of it like Docker, but it's a way to host those containers. And I just saw Ubuntu the other day. Ubuntu Linux created something called Ubuntu Core, which to me, I haven't paid that much attention to it so far, but to me it looks a bit like they're trying to get into the business of hosting or having the facilities to host containers on their operating system very easily and readily for developers, and make it easy to maintain the underlying operating system without regard for what's in those containers. So I think it's a emerging set of technologies, lots of companies getting interested in it and excited about it, and then developers figuring out what to do with it.
I think flexibility has been kind of one of those key components that has made the cloud so attractive, that flexibility and agility when approaching a product that you can deploy quickly to destroy quickly. And as the pace of that is increased by containerization, you really are going to see the amplification of that flexibility, and that's I think some of the things you mentioned around developers being able to deploy wherever they want, not worry so much, have that that flexibility at their fingertips, means that they can really worry more about the code and not have to have those concerns of, when I hand this over to the ops side, what am I going to find? Like what gotchas are out there that I haven't run into yet? Those concerns start to fall away, and they're really able to double down on the work that they add and their value. I think that's going to be just a wonderful thing to see the results of. It's a lot of time and energy that's no longer going to be spent doing triage work, but more cool tools that are going to be built.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that Docker is great for developers, but I think it's also great for people that might not be as technical, because I think that you have this container and it's just ready to go. And my manager, who is not a Linux admin, he came from the Windows world, and now he's working in the community with us, and he needed to set up an internal tool that we were going to be evaluating, and he was able to get it set up. He used one of our cloud orchestration templates, set up a Docker server, and then just set everything up using Docker and deployed it from GitHub, and it was up and running in just a matter of minutes. And
Right.
and that's the type of thing that can, especially if you're a smaller business or a smaller business unit within a larger business, being able to have the application containerized and ready just to deploy wherever you need to. I mean, that saved us a ton of time and effort.
Ultimately, it just sort of removes the friction from
Right.
deploying applications or redeploying or moving. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of these kinds of tools, is make it simple for me. And the side effect is you do get more efficiency in the infrastructure as well. You can put more workloads on a given machine rather than having, in the old days we used to put one app per server because we didn't really have any way to protect one application from another. We didn't.
Right.
They would sometimes collide with one another. They'd step on each other's dependencies. But with containers, you get away from a lot of that, and therefore you can put more and more and more workloads on a given machine. And if that machine should need to be, lighten the load a little bit, you take a few containers off of it and redeploy them somewhere else. And I think so that friction, removing the friction from deployment, redeployment, even break fix. If you have a problem, kill the container, start another one, see if it fixes the problem. If it fixes the problem, something was broken, but you don't really care. This is a disposable resource that you can just kind of move on, and you can go troubleshoot it later on if you want to. You can figure out what the source was, but ultimately your goal is just to get back up and running very quickly, and that friction removed out of that process just is tremendous for anybody, any DevOps engineer, sysadmin, developer, or even a manager who just wants to have their application running very quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely think the containers are going to be. This is one that I'm in 100% agreement with you on. It's containers.
Yeah.
Is not the last we're going to talk about containers within the next
Absolutely.
370.
It might be in my next year's predictions too. I don't know. This is one of the ones that might only get bigger in the next few years, so we'll see.
That's a good prediction. The containers will be in your next prediction.
Just add a fourth container to it. Just containers,
That's right.
containers,
That's right.
and then there you go.
Nice.
You got it.
Nice. Well, hey, if you're just joining us right now, this is the Rackspace Cloud Office Hours Hangout. We're hanging out with our CTO John Engates, and we're talking about his 2015 Cloud Predictions blog. And if you want to join in on the conversation, there's a couple of different ways that you can. If you're watching live, you can drop us a comment on Google+. There's a little question and answer application where you can go in and leave your comments and questions there. If you're following along, you can leave on YouTube. You can leave a comment there on YouTube. We'll catch those. And then if you want to use the hashtag CloudQA on Twitter, we'll be able to catch those as well. So we've already talked about a couple of different predictions that we've had so far. One, that there's going to be more choices in the cloud, and then we kind of followed up on that with containers and how they really help to facilitate more choices as well. But another one that I wanted to jump into that we've talked about, or that we haven't had a chance to talk about, and this is one that I think is going to be really fun, is IT gets censored. That's with an S, not with a C. So as a dad, I like puns myself, so I was naturally drawn to that one. But I also think that this is really good. I mean, censors I think are coming up everywhere. I've got multiple ones on myself just about at any time, and we see that they're coming into our everyday life more and more. So tell us about that and what you're seeing
Sure.
with the censors.
Well, that's definitely a bad pun. IT gets censored, but you could also say it gets censored. It being anything in our daily lives, and that's where you sort of start to hear a lot about the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is a maybe a buzzword, but it's also a reality that everything in our daily lives is starting to be connected to the cloud or have some sort of sensor that's feeding an application. It could be an app that you use for your daily exercise routine to track where you are, how far you've run. It has GPS. My phone, I have a new iPhone 6 Plus, and I think there's dozen or more sensors on that device. Everything from light sensors to how many steps I've taken every day. So all those things are going to be embedded in our daily lives, in our cars, in our homes, in our devices that we use, potentially even for medical purposes in our bodies down the road. The opportunity for us to instrument our lives is something that has really never been quite like it is today because of the miniaturization of technology and the advancement of battery life and the ability to get that data out of the device into the cloud to where it can be analyzed, where it can be presented back to us in interesting ways and mashed up. Those are what I think is driving this idea of getting censored. And that I've talked a lot about consumer sensors, but this thing also applies in the business world as well. I mean, I think I mentioned medical. That's an area where we're going to see a lot of that. I think manufacturing, having access to data that's flowing through your warehouse or through it could be a oil pipeline, or it could be a jet engine. It could be anything that has a moving part in it that might need to be measured or monitored. And the cloud has just made it wireless as well. I shouldn't overlook wireless, but cloud plus wireless is what's allowed us to really make use of all that data. Historically, we've collected data. A lot of times it was locked up in some sort of system somewhere, then we didn't really use it much. Smart meters on our home, when you have a meter, electrical meter on the side of your house, that data now isn't only held in that meter. It's actually shipped off to a storage in the cloud, and that's how we start to make use of all this stuff. And that those technologies are just now starting to emerge and get off the ground. We're going to see so much innovation through the course of 2015 and beyond. It's really hard to even fathom. I think the smart watch is going to be another aspect of this, having an Apple Watch that's coming and all the Android-based watches that are already out in the market. That's going to be ridiculous in terms of how we start to use these sensors and utilize them in real time. I mean, right now I could potentially be looking at my watch, monitoring something at home, or looking at some sort of trend going on in the market or whatever it might be. And I just think that's going to be everywhere.
You're already actually seeing a lot of the insurance companies offer this as an incentive to kind of lower your rate. Is we'll plug this thing in and we'll keep a tab on what it is that you're doing with your vehicle, how fast it's going, how often you're using it, things like that. So they can mine that data from their customer base, and they're going to be able to make great use of that information to fine-tune rates, and your rates may go up or down depending on your driving habits. I'm not going to say anything about that, but that's the way that they're approaching the fact that sensors are so inexpensive now and that they're so pervasive. As more and more industries find ways to incorporate those components into their business model, you don't have to send a meter reader around to read the electrical meter or the water meter anymore. It's part of a network. It's being pulled automatically, and that head count and that time is no longer part of their process. They don't have to think about those components as a day-to-day part of operating their business. They're able to take the data naturally, do something valuable with it, and spend those human resources dollars elsewhere. And I think that's going to be one of those really compelling pieces to what cloud is doing. And it brings me to your next point. That's kind of the value proposition of being able to have these tools and of being able to have a partner who can deliver specific expertise that keeps your headcount down. Right. Is going to be a huge deal, and it's one of the things that you pinpoint as one of the key values of the cloud. As technology grows, you're going to need more expertise, more tools, more options. So could you give us a little bit more color and texture to that specific point?
Well, I think And I think the one you're talking about may be the one about it's not only the cost that counts, but also the the things that go into
Right.
making the cloud work for you. And I think that's more important than ever because you're going to start to see more companies that have traditionally not been known or seen as tech companies get into the cloud because they have to. If you're a company that is installing air conditioners or heating systems, used to be it was a contained, self-contained unit that didn't have any connection to the cloud. But nowadays, a thermostat certainly does have a connection to the cloud, and it's real time, and you have to start to understand how and why that how it works, why it needs to be on all the time, how the technology fits together, and so that expertise doesn't exist in every company. Some of that expertise needs to be borrowed. It needs to be loaned from a company like Rackspace. I mean, we're in a world today where people sometimes don't want to own a car; they want to borrow a car. They want to share, with the Uber or Lyft. I think that you could sort of think about what we do with managed cloud as almost like that sharing economy, where you start to tap into somebody else's expertise, somebody else's ability to help you along when you need it at the right time. And be in some ways a safety net as well. If you're a company that doesn't have a deep expertise in IT and technology, if you may be okay to launch a product, but as that product grows in popularity or as it starts to really take off, you need a safety net. You need somebody behind you backing you up and making sure and guaranteeing that your applications are running well and you're using the right technology and you're staying on the leading edge of technology and not getting further and further behind. So I think that's what we're trying to do with the idea of managed cloud is take the. It's not just about the cost. It's not just about the cheapest unit of cloud computing. It's about the total cost. It's about making it work for you and guaranteeing you success when you start to adopt cloud computing. And I think that's something that a lot of companies are going to have to do. We did that this year, obviously with the launch of Managed Cloud, but we also did it with somebody else's cloud, Google Apps for Work, which is basically Gmail for business. A lot of companies are struggling with even email. Email is still a technology that some companies have a difficult time with, and getting their mobile devices to sync with it and getting that mail migrated over. And so Rackspace is in a unique position with our expertise, the fanatical support that we've built here. We think we can apply it to all manner of problems that customers are having with adopting cloud computing and really make it easy and painless for them to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think we've gone over a lot of the managed cloud aspect of it. I mean, I know that you the second time that you were on the show, we went over a little bit of managed cloud and kind of our recent market toward more managed cloud. So that's something that anybody that's watching this might want to go back and take a look at that one as well. We did a great job, I think, of kind of defining what our position was on that. This is one of the things that I really enjoy working with Rackspace is I don't just answer questions and fix a problem. I really get to become a partner with a lot of our customers and try to figure out not just the immediate question of hey, why is my website not loading? Okay, yeah, we can help you figure out that, but let's go beyond that now and let's figure out what we can do as a trusted partner to figure out how to grow your entire business. And that's something that I really enjoy the opportunity to do, both on my time on the launch team, working with brand new customers, and now in the community I get to do a little bit more proactively to try to get some of that stuff out there. But it's great, and that's one of the things that Rackspace does that I really enjoy as well. All right. Well, let's see. I think we've gone through quite a few. Let's jump over here to the next one. Oh, one thing I did want to mention as well. We were talking about sensors before. We did have a show with our colleague Robert Scoble, and he actually has a book out right now about sensors. I think it's The Age of Context, and it's and that's a great read if you're at all interested in sensors. I highly recommend taking a look at that.
He's at a conference right now, I think, talking probably about that book to some extent, but also talking about drones. He's so excited about drones. I am too, by the way. I know this isn't a show about drones, but that's the coolest emerging area, and all of that is a bunch of sensors as well. Think about what you can do with the cameras that are going to be attached to those drones, and what that means for businesses and consumers, and what the construction industry is getting all excited about drones because they can now map their construction sites
Yeah.
and measure things in real time. I mean, it's just a crazy technology rate of innovation going on out there, and it just touches everything. It's so hard to even sort of tease these things apart, and that's why he calls it age of context, because it's all around us. It's our context, and the world is going to know more and more about us and be able to use that technology or that knowledge to make the experiences better. And I think we're just going to see it everywhere.
Yeah, I've got a cousin who's part of that, mapping the construction progress of major construction efforts, so that he can send that back. And it's amazing the kinds of things that they're able to use, and the budget items that are getting struck from their yearly budgets because of this, because you had to send experts on all of the different components of a build to the job site,
right,
put them up in hotels, let them do what they needed to do to verify, we're on pace, we're doing all these things, just for short periods of time throughout their build process. But this is a bunch of different people. This is flights, this is hotels, this is making sure that they eat and all of those things. You send one guy out with the drone, he covers the whole thing, you send that file to the relevant parties, and you've saved, for that project, who knows how much money.
I mean, it's a whole lot like the the idea of doctors and their remote scanning with their X-ray machines or CT scans or whatever. It's a radiologist now doesn't have to be next to the machine anymore. They can be remote, and I think that same thing's going on here. You have those experts with a 4K camera attached to a drone, streaming that data up to the cloud and storing it and analyzing it, and maybe even getting to the point where we automatically analyze some of that stuff. There's no reason we can't attach infrared cameras or sort of the different type of camera that could spectrally analyze welding or steel or whatever it might be on a job site, and do that in a very automated way. Those drones can fly based on GPS. They can program instructions into them to fly wherever you need them to be on a schedule and come back and download that data automatically. That is just going to change so much, and I think that, again, the cloud has so much to do with this. These things wouldn't necessarily be possible if we didn't have wireless, high-speed, internet connections up to the cloud, places to store. Big data is one of my other predictions we're going to talk about here. Where do you analyze that data? Where do you analyze the video? I met a company the other day that is taking long-form video and analyzing the speech out of those videos, extracting metadata out of the videos that otherwise would just be sitting on a disk somewhere. How do you search that stuff? How do you make use of this mountain of data that we're collecting? The ways that a lot of people are starting to do that. Can I jump the gun and talk about the big data? Is that
absolutely?
I'm already kind of doing that. So so really, it's this idea that big data is really kind of coming into its own. We've seen Hadoop, we've seen tools like MongoDB and others that are sort of the early platforms for big data analytics and storage. But I think it's hitting its stride. You're seeing new tools like Apache Spark, Apache Mesos, all these different tools for big data and analytics and distributed computing start to emerge and mature. And the maturity is the bit that's important, because a lot of companies are reluctant to jump in until they start to see some success by other companies. They don't want to be necessarily the guy that gets burned on the bleeding edge or gets cut on the bleeding edge. They want to be the company that really takes advantage of it once the platforms mature a bit. And I think 2015, you'll see more and more adoption of a variety of big data tools, big data architectures, because they're starting to see success. They're starting to see their competitors get comfortable with it. The idea of a data scientist is something that's emerging. You're starting to see those people go through school and take what used to be a statistics degree and turn it into a data science degree, and actually make use of their knowledge and their experience in a company rather than an academic setting. And that's really, I think, what's going to light the fire of big data for a lot of companies. Everybody's going to start to have a big data problem, so to speak. People used to I read a number of websites. One of them is Hacker News. Hacker News is the best one to sort of see the latest and greatest going on. And every day, a year ago, there'd be somebody coming on to Hacker News and saying, you don't have a big data problem, you have a small data problem. Why are you trying to use big data tools to solve it? Well, the truth is, I think people will figure out what to do with these tools, and they will make a big data problem that they can go and use to make their business better, or tap into some sort of social media or analytics problem that, historically they probably didn't have a big data problem, but with all the feeds and all the data that's sort of spewing out of these sensors that we talked about, and in the analytics of video or audio or social media data or credit cards, all of that stuff combined really is a big data problem. And I think everybody recognizes that if they're not using data effectively within their company, they're going to get behind, they're going to be on the losing end of the spectrum.
The kinds of questions that come up once you start peeling back layers of, what data do I have and what can I ask it, really turns on light bulbs with all kinds of businesses. It's business as usual until someone says, hey, if I could tell you this specific thing, like what does the effect of weather have to do with your sales, would you want to know that? Well, of course I want to know that. But there's no way to, but here's big data. This does this for you. Those are the kinds of things that people are just now realizing are possible. Questions that, why would I even ask that? How can I find that information? Now, data scientists can say, well, show me what you got, and I can probably deliver a pretty good answer. Now that people are realizing that these are answerable questions, that there's so much deeper that they can go to really understand and grasp more holistically their customer base or their employees, or what they can do to engage a larger percentage of the people that they are employing every day to go towards that, that final goal that they have as an organization. It's going to be inevitable for people to create these big data problems that can be solved more and more readily. So it's really exciting to see the growth of tools. Are there any specific tools that you've kind of seen rumblings about that you're most excited to see grow in 2015?
Well, some of the things that we've done recently, I think, are pretty cool. We launched our Hadoop offering on top of OnMetal. We also introduced Apache Spark, which is a sort of a real-time analytics versus, a lot of these traditional Hadoop and other kind of analytics packages look at data sort of from history. They look at the past data. They don't look at data sort of flying by in real time. And I think what you're starting to see is sort of this, sort of turning point in big data where people want to look at data and query data like they do a traditional database. They want to actually ask questions in real time. They want those questions to be fed back to their users in real time. It might be giving suggestions on an e-commerce website about which products to buy, or giving users a way to find the right fit of which hotel, which vacation, I don't know, whatever the question people have might be. Big data tools are now more equipped than ever to answer those kinds of questions in real time. And the tooling is getting so much easier for the developers to build around that they're starting to literally be able to ask questions, like I just mentioned, as almost like a database query against a traditional relational database. But it's not a relational database. It's a unstructured data set that might be multiple terabytes or petabytes or something that just spans a number of different data sources. And that's the really cool part, is people start to dump all that data in. They start to think about what questions they could ask. They get a few pieces of information and answers, and they start to put that together with other bits of data that they have or may have in other systems. And it really just sort of gets the creative juices flowing in a lot of these companies, and starts to say, man, what could we do if? What could we do if we had all of this data in one place? And that's what we're seeing these tools start to help with. So Apache Spark is a new one. The tools that we've launched on our OnMetal give you tremendous horsepower. One of the really big bottlenecks in a lot of big data platforms is the underlying storage or CPU or memory. And with OnMetal, we've just sort of removed almost all of those bottlenecks and giving you the access to the raw horsepower that you need. And that really just changes the equation quite a bit when it comes to using big data tools to solve your problems. We talked about Redis, we talked about Hadoop. Those are great tools under the Object Rocket umbrella here at Rackspace. And there are so many more out there in the ecosystem. I would certainly encourage people to just keep up with sort of the market that's out there for big data tools and analytics platforms.
Definitely, it's big data is really everywhere now, and like you guys mentioned, just having that access to the just knowing that you can find that out, I think, is going to propel a lot of people in the next couple of years to dive into it. So, good. Well, let's jump into the next item that we had here, which was about the CMO becoming the CMT. So we're talking about marketing now, and how now that's turning ever more toward technology. So what was the insight behind that?
Well, this one's pretty straightforward. I mean, CMO stands for Chief Marketing Officer, and that's typically the head of a marketing department within a company. And we've already talked a lot about how every product, every device, every company is becoming a tech company, or there's going to have a cloud connection associated with your product. And I think the CMO is oftentimes the person in the driver's seat for that, because they know to get the word out, to be competitive, to have a great user experience, they have to have a mobile application, they have to have a cloud connection of some sort. So they're oftentimes the instigator or the troublemaker within the company that says, we must get to the cloud, we must go faster, and we must be innovative. So when we say CMO turns into a CMT, the CMT, I don't know if there's a real role called CMT, Chief Marketing Technologist, but every CMO is having to start to understand technology more. They're starting to have some of the characteristics of a CTO, where they're seeing the market, they're seeing what people are doing with technology in other parallel markets or competitive markets, and start to bring that back to their own organization and use it. I mean, I just saw something this week about HBO and their streaming platform and what they're using. I mean, HBO used to broadcast their TV over cable. I mean, that was a very relatively low tech kind of way to get the media out to the consumer. But today, they are tasked now with doing it on mobile devices and on tablets, and streamed over the air in real time, and having all of that kind of available to their users or their customers in real time. And that is a very different equation than what it used to be for the marketer that wants to get users onto their platform. They now have to really grasp the technology. So that's all I was getting at there. I think that historically all of the IT has been cooped up in the IT department. I think more of it's bleeding over into marketing, into the product development, into that side of the business, and that will increase, and possibly you may end up having senior technologists leading up marketing because of the requirements that are behind the scenes.
Yeah. So before I came to Rackspace, I worked for a company called Central Desktop, and we were a collaboration suite, and we ended up kind of pivoting and moving toward the marketing vertical. And we kind of saw that it was all cloud-based, and we saw a lot of marketers that were really wanting to find efficiencies in the cloud by being able to collaborate not only internally with their organization, but then with their external stakeholders, and that's something that we were able to provide to them, by using cloud-based technologies and getting things out of the corporate file share and into a completely accessible from everywhere cloud cloud platform. And so that's definitely something that I've seen, and I think that we'll see a little bit more of that. And then you mentioned HBO Go, moving toward the cloud and moving things that way. That's I think that's another huge thing that we're going to see is that might just be that first domino that gets tipped over that really knocks out that older, really now, 30, 40-year-old technology for distributing content. And so that'll be very interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, as more and more organizations are seeing that marketing shift towards technology and really having to embrace these new technologies, new components, it's really kind of exciting to see how quickly people are bringing that in, are kind of taking the IT world under the wing of marketing and seeing what comes of those collaborations. There's been a lot of, I guess, media marketing buzz the last month or so about this whole all the hacks, I guess. There have been hacks all year that have been going on between different organizations, and one of the things you mentioned is secure IT being a huge shift. That, well, a focus, I guess. It's not really a shift. Everybody's paying attention to security, but as the spotlight continues to shine brighter and brighter through NSA stuff that we've seen, through a lot of the bugs that have come out over the last year, and then a lot of the hacking that's made it into the news, I think security is just going to become a bigger and bigger concern, and it's clearly something that you see as a continued focus and a growing.
Yeah, we put that into the predictions because based on the trend seems to be that more and more hacks are happening more and more frequently. People are having difficulty and trouble responding to those events. They're certainly not doing a great job preventing them, so they're in that firefighting mode after they happen. And so what I predict is that you'll see, I mean, this is, anytime there's a problem like this to be solved, you will have a great deal of people kind of coming to the market very quickly to try to, sort of shore up that challenge or fill that need for those companies. So security as a service is kind of one of the things that I'm, starting to see more and more companies talk about. It used to be security was it maybe a device or an appliance that would show up in a box. Security was maybe a set of best practices that would be on a document and would be a checklist maybe, or a compliance regimen that you'd follow. But today, I think, an audit, something like that. But today, I think what you're going to start to see more and more of are security services that are delivered from the cloud, that are wrapping maybe your devices in a secure container of some sort. I mean, I can imagine, today with the mobile workforce that we have, think about how hard it must be for companies to secure the endpoint devices, the laptops, the tablets, and the mobile phones, smartphones we have. They're reluctant to turn those things off because users love them. They love the access. They love the convenience. So they don't want to turn it off. They can't, secure it easily. So, what I foresee will start to happen is you'll start to see services pop up that allow companies to route their traffic through a number of services that sort of protect those endpoint devices, whether they be a mobile device with a proxy server somewhere where all the traffic, you don't want it to have to come back to headquarters every time, but you will want it to be able to be protected and maybe the content monitored or washed for malware of some sort. That needs to be a cloud service because we're so distributed nowadays. It can't be something that's centralized and sitting on an appliance like a firewall or like a device that becomes a bottleneck for all practical purposes. It needs to be something that's distributed as well, and that could be right on the device, but more likely it becomes something that lives in the cloud and all the data coming and going to those devices gets routed through it. And that really will be an interesting sort of new area of evolution. The other thing is security in the cloud itself. When we're building cloudy applications, they aren't easy to protect in the same old ways we used to build. We don't have a single entry point all the time for our traffic. We can't use an edge device or a boundary gateway device. We have to start to secure in a different way, in a sort of a more modern architectural way. And I think companies are going to pick up that challenge, and they're going to innovate, and they're going to create a lot of new services and capabilities that both consumers and businesses can start to use to be secure and to help them get a handle on all of this hacking and malware and challenges that they have today.
With all that said, I think that it allows for a good pivot into the OpenStack conversation, because for a long time it was just worried about features. Now you mentioned that it's something that's going to be more focused around maturity and solidifying what it is and how it works, so that things like security can be a heightened focus. It's those polishing components that we're really getting to now with OpenStack, and you mentioned that it's boring, which is a fantastic place to be for a platform, something that's foundational.
Right. Well, it is foundational, and that was the title of the little bit in my predictions, was the OpenStack gets boring in 2015, and that's because it's maturing. Again, it's one of those technologies that it's 4 or 5 years old now. There are tons of companies contributing to it, using it, beating it up every day, making it better every day, putting in features, but also polishing, like you mentioned, to make it easy to use, easy to deploy, easy to upgrade. And when it gets to that stage, you're not seeing every day some brand new major thing happening to it, whether it be a controversy or a new feature or something going on. You're going to see refinements. You're going to see polish. You're going to see things where it sort of grows up and gets to be something that is a foundational technology. And it truly is starting to feel like that. The bigger events, these are massive conferences that we go to twice a year, and you don't have quite the same kinds of discussions as we used to have. It used to be we were criticized every time we turned around for not being mature and not having this feature or not having a comprehensive set of capabilities, or our ecosystem was immature. Well, a lot of those criticisms are gone. So there must be something going on in the right direction. It's not for lack of interest in OpenStack, because OpenStack is being used by more and more companies every day, more companies than we ever expected when we created OpenStack 5 years ago, 4 years ago. But at the same time, there isn't quite the criticisms lobbed at the platform. So that must mean that they're doing something right. And I didn't mean that OpenStack was really boring. I just meant that it's getting to the stage where people can rely on it. They have faith in it. It's something that's much more stable and mature and just very usable for more companies than ever.
Yeah, we saw that maturity discussed a lot. Drew put together a series of hangouts with the participants live at the Paris OpenStack Summit, and almost every single person that we had come through on that series of shows mentioned how there was a growing number of operators. In the past, it had mostly been the developers of OpenStack that were getting together, but that number still plenty of developers there, but an increasing proportion of operators who were there, and I think that speaks to the fact that it is mature now, and
Ready
it is
for prime time. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, good. Glad to see that. And by the way, go back if anybody has a chance to look back at those shows, has an interest in learning more about OpenStack, check that out. That is a really solid series of insights into what the people that were there got to see. So go back and check those out. We'll link to them there. All right. Well, we have one more prediction that we haven't hit up on yet, and that is the alternative Silicon Rising. So
Okay.
we're talking a little bit about different chip manufacturers, server manufacturers, and changes in the way that we can actually do this whole cloud computing thing.
Okay. So this one's pretty cool because I think it's the first time in my history at Rackspace. I've been here for 14 years. It's crazy to say that, but it's the first time that we've ever seriously looked at an alternative from a traditional x86 architecture seriously. It's the first time that us and a number of other people in our industry are starting to think that there might be some real alternatives out there for different architectures, CPU architectures that would either save cost or give us more power, more compute power, more price performance. ARM is one. From the mobile side of the industry, mobile has obviously the CPU horsepower in our mobile phones is vastly different than it used to be in a mobile phone, and a tablet is almost on par now with a laptop. You start to see a tablet and a laptop having similar characteristics in terms of performance, and that's because there's been so much innovation in the mobile space. Those mobile processors have started to make the leap into servers. Server processors and mobile processors, why not use some of that same technology? There's so much innovation going on. They're pushing the power. I mean, where is power more important than in a tablet or a mobile device? So that same benefit of low power has started to bleed over into the server architecture. Well, at the same time that ARM has been a manufacturer behind mobile devices trying to get that into the server world, another long-standing server architecture that maybe most people on this this blog or this forum don't think too much about would be the IBM Power architecture. IBM Power, which they now call Open Power because it's an open source sort of project around the Power architecture, is something that has emerged really this year. Google has been involved in open power in a big way. One of the Google leaders sits on the board of the Open Power Forum, and there's starting to be companies looking at alternative architectures because they do provide better price, performance, power, utilization, all those benefits that you need at cloud scale, at mega scale. They start to be amplified at that scale, and any kind of optimization that you can get out of one of these platforms is a huge win, not only for the cloud provider, but for the user as well, because it brings the price down, it allows them to use more CPU more cheaply, and I think we're going to start to see, either in 2015 or early 2016, you're going to start to see these actually make their way into real cloud computing platforms. You probably already have them behind the scenes and don't even know it. That's the truth of the matter, is that they're maybe not in the aspects of the cloud that you would directly interact with. It might be not, maybe available in a cloud server or a compute, server of some sort, but behind the scenes, maybe in some of the platform as a service or software as a service architectures, they're probably already being used. It's easier if you have an application that you control from top to bottom. If you're Facebook or if you're Google, you own the application, you own the data center. So it's a lot easier to adopt that kind of technology. But I think that at that scale, it's starting to bleed over into the offerings that you're going to see cloud providers bring to their customers as well. And I can't put my finger on exactly when that will happen. It's a matter of how fast does the industry embrace it, how fast does the technology mature. But with open compute and open power and some of the work that we're seeing out there in the community, I have to believe it's coming very soon.
Well, and Open Compute is powering our on-metal servers, if I'm not mistaken.
Indeed.
Yeah. So
now, Open Compute in our data centers is still using x86 architecture, but that next step would be, why wouldn't we look at other competing technology architectures to power some of those Open Compute platforms? Because the price, the performance, and the ultimately the benefits to the user are just undeniable. That we ought to looking at those technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to see what that brings down the road, because there are plenty of new technologies out there, it looks like. Well, all right. Hey, it's been an hour, and it's been really insightful. I really enjoyed this time learning a little bit more about your predictions there, and I think that they're all really solid predictions. And you graded yourself a B for this previous year, and I think that you'll have a pretty decent grade again coming up next year.
I'd sure like to get an A one of these years. So let's go. Let's do this again next year, and we'll see how well I did on some of these predictions.
All right. We'll put it on the calendar.
Right.
Definitely. All right. Well, great. Hey, thanks again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Congratulations again on your Tech Titan Award
Sure.
for San Antonio. Well earned. And congratulations on 14 years at Rackspace. That's really solid.
Thank you very much, guys, and I appreciate everybody that's joined today, and enjoyed being with you.
All right. Well, hey, you can catch your Hangout just about every week. We usually do this on Thursdays at 1 o'clock Central Time. I think since we're coming up into the holidays here, we'll probably be doing a couple of little small batch Hangouts. So be on the lookout for those in the next couple of weeks here, and I guess we'll probably see you next week, or excuse me, next year on a little bit more recurring basis. So thanks again to John and to Drew for working with us today, and thanks Tyler behind the scenes making this all run. We'll see everybody next time. Take it easy.
Thank you. See ya.